Hello, everyone. How are you? Thanks very much, everyone. You're so very, very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jim Culleton, and together with my colleagues Eva and Gavin, Chandrika and Ronan, we're delighted to welcome you here to Poetry Ireland for this day to discuss challenges and opportunities and issues related to playwriting and for playwrights and theatre makers in Ireland today. We were really, I suppose it's designed as part of a programme of activities to mark Fishamble's 30th year as a company, and it's part of our New Play Clinic programme. And we announced it, and we were delighted that it booked out so quickly and that there was a waiting list so quickly. So thank you so much for your enthusiasm for the day. I met Claire Monley outside, and she was saying it's a bit like a rock concert for playwrights with lots of legends performing. So no pressure on the speakers. But it's really great to see you all here. Just to let you know that we're going to be filming the day's events. It'll be available on YouTube. Evan's filming it here, and Angus through Rise Productions is going to send out a podcast as well. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible to people that weren't able to get here, either because it was booked out or because they weren't able to get to Dublin for the day. So just to let you know that whatever's discussed will be recorded in that way. The morning will be a series of 15-minute discussions, and then we'll have lunch for an hour, and then in the afternoon from 2 to 4 we'll have a panel discussion, and then it'll be open to you guys to discuss anything you wish. We'll kind of open it up to the floor for questions, and we'll finish at 4, but then there's sort of informal chat after that for a while. We're very grateful to Maureen Kennelly and her team here at Poetry Ireland for letting us use this beautiful building for the day, and also to Tesco Finest for sponsoring the refreshments. So there'll be so the room and the refreshments are available after the day to keep chatting if you wish to do so. We'd also like to thank our funders, the Arts Council, Dublin City Council, and all the other funders that are part of the programme of work we're doing this year. So I'm going to pass you over to Chandrika for a moment, who's just going to take you through a few quick housekeeping and terms and condition kind of things, and then we'll kick off. Okay, thanks, Chandrika.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming. First of all, not the most exciting thing, but housekeeping. So the toilets are just out this door and on the other side of this wall, basically. For anyone who might have access issues, there's a special entrance at the back through the car park. So if you want to talk to me about anyone who might be attending who might need assistance, let me know. If anyone wants to head outside for a bit of air, everyone's welcome to go out the back that side, and there's a small yard over there. Just to let you know that the link for the live streaming is, sorry, 1 second. Let me get that up for you. It is youtube.com/user/Fishamble/newplayco/live. I'll be posting this on Twitter as well if you would like to share this with anyone who is unable to attend. So just to give you the full schedule for the day, we're going to start with Siobhán Bourke and Claire Keogh from IrishTheatre Institute, followed by our own Gavin Kostick. After that, we'll have Caroline Williams from the Stewart Parker Trust, and then Jen Coppinger and Jessie Weaver from the Abbey, followed by Ruth Little. At 11:45, we will have a break for 15 minutes, after which we will have Rosaline McDonough, Rebecca Mears, Rachel West, Eva O'Connor, and Bjarne Janssen. And then we'll break for lunch at 1:15 for about an hour, and after which will follow a panel discussion and a Q&A, and then at 4 o'clock we'll break to have some more tea and coffee and a bit more cake from Tesco Finest. So thank you, Tesco Finest. If you have any other questions about the day, feel free to come to me. I'll be in this corner. So enjoy the day. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Chandrika. That's great. And just to say as well that if you wouldn't mind putting your phones on silent, please, for the day, but feel free to leave them on if you wish. And if you want to access the Wi-Fi code here, when you get the options on your phone, what will come up is UPC 229728. So that's the Poetry Ireland Wi-Fi. UPC 229728, and the password is spirit level, and that's with a capital S and a capital L, but no gaps. So it's UPC 229728. Password spirit level with an S, capital S and L. And I'll leave that actually. Do you want to put them all maybe? There are two different options. One of them won't work for me, so that's lunch. We know people aren't here just for the cakes and the tea and coffee, despite the housekeeping rules earlier on. Okay, so to start off, I would just like to introduce our first speakers. We're delighted that our colleagues at the Irish Theatre Institute have come along to share some facts and figures and thoughts about playwriting and the development of playwriting in the country over the last couple of decades. We always love working with the ITI. It's a fantastic resource organisation for all of us, and we're thrilled that today Siobhán, Bourke and Keogh are here to talk to us. Thanks very much.
ITI is a resource organisation for Irish theatre makers, artists and producers. We deliver a number of artist support schemes, including Six in the Attic, Prime, Elevator and our partners in Show in a Bag. We are closely aligned with many playwrights through our schemes, particularly through Six in the Attic Alumni and the annual Phelim Donlan Playwrights Bursary and Residency. One of our core activities is Playography Ireland, which we created in 2001 and have been updating, delivering and enhancing ever since. So what is Playography Ireland? It's an online database resource that captures the new Irish play repertoire, in English since the foundation of the Abbey in 1904, and in Irish since the premiere of Kostick on Sugan in 1901. And contains detailed information on new plays professionally produced in Ireland, North and South.
Sorry. Over 4,800 new plays are recorded on the database, 833 of which are in the Irish language. There are also over 150 e-plays available to download from the website. For inclusion in playography, ITI defines a new play as a piece of new writing or a new adaptation or translation of an existing work by a playwright. Each play entry includes information on the original cast and production team, the date, venue, and producer of the premiere production, as well as information on the script and rights availability. The information for each entry is taken from original production programs, with additional information taken from flyers, posters, festival programs, and reviews. And we work closely with playwrights, theatre companies, archives and agents to source this information. The findings we will present today are a snapshot of premieres of new Irish plays written in English from the past 10 years, that is 2008 to 2017.
We don't have the figures for the new plays in Irish for 2017, but we can tell you that 54 new plays in the Irish language premiered between 2008 and 2016.
So we will also present figures from the previous 10-year period, 1998 to 2007, to illustrate how the repertoire is evolving and the way plays are being produced is changing. The two periods in question are interesting because the last 10 years roughly covers a period of economic recession, when the structure of the Irish theatre landscape has changed from a predominantly company-based model of production to a predominantly project-based model. This is in stark contrast to the previous period, which is from 1998 to 2007, which spans the Celtic Tiger period, where the production of new plays was within the context of regularly funded companies. Despite the comparable lack of money available to artists during the past 10 years, some of our statistics comparing the two periods may surprise you. So, what we see here is that between 1998 and 2007, 625 new plays premiered, compared with 2008 to 2017, when 762 new plays premiered.
This shows an increase of 22% in the past 10 years compared to the previous period. With a move away from the company model, we see more smaller scale new plays being produced than ever before.
So this chart shows the new plays premiered in the past 10 years by play type. 75% of new plays were original work, with 15% adaptations, 7% theatre for young audiences, 2% musical theatre, and 1% physical or devised theatre. When we compare the play types from the past 10 years with the previous period, we see a 42% increase in original plays, with adaptations up 16% and musical theatre up 28%. Physical or devised theatre is down by 67%, and theatre for young audiences is down by 35%.
And some of these decreases can be attributed to the closures of Barabbas the Company and Team Educational Theatre Company.
So, this chart shows the timeline for new plays over the past 10 years. We see a natural curve here with a peak in 2013 when 100 new plays premiered.
So here are some of our suggestions for why we have this peak. The peak reflects the impact of a number of things. One is the opening of Theatre Upstairs, the opening that has had on the new play repertoire, which was acknowledged in 2013 with the Judge's Special Award to Carol Shields at the Irish Times Theatre Awards. It also reflects the impact of Show in a Bag now in its 7th year. It reflects the increased emphasis in new Irish work in both the Dublin Fringe Festival and Dublin Theatre Festival in this period. It also reflects the rise of the self-producing artists. And then you'll notice that we start to see a decline in the last couple of years, and this, we believe, reflects the effects of the cuts in Northern Ireland, the impact those cuts have had on the number of productions produced on the island.
So we saw a decrease in the average cast size of new plays between 2008 and 2017 when compared with the previous period, with the average number of actors per play falling from 5 to 4.
I hope you can see this slide. Essentially, it says at the top-hand corner, number of monologue plays by year, and it goes from 2008 to 2017. And you'll see that the number of monologues in the past 10 years has increased by 6%. And the peaks were in 21 monologues in 2011 that is, and 19 monologues premiered in 2013.
So this chart shows the authorship of new plays premiered in the last 10 years. Of the total 762 plays premiered, 436 were by male playwrights, 245 were by female playwrights, and 81 were co-authored or devised by the company. Of those plays by a single playwright, the ratio of female to male playwrights is 36% women to 64% men. And this is actually a 10% increase on the number of single-authored plays by women premiered in the previous period. So that's between 1998 and 2007, the ratio was 26% women and 74% men.
So on this slide, it says playwrights with 6 or more new plays and/or adaptations in the period 1998 to 2007. And what you see is that Frank McGuinness was the most prolific playwright in this period, with 11 new play premieres. Of the 14 playwrights who are listed there with 6 more new plays premieres in the period, only 2 are women. Deirdre Kinahan had 10 new plays, and Mary Elizabeth Bourke Kennedy had 6 new play premieres.
When we look at the most prolific playwrights for the last 10 years, we see the gender evolution quite plainly. Of the 11 playwrights with more than 6 plays produced between 2008 and 2017, 6 are women. In fact, Rosemary Jenkinson is the most prolific playwright with 15 new plays premiered in the last 10 years. And it's interesting to note that all of these are original works. You'll also notice that the playwrights in pink were playwrights who also featured heavily in the previous list.
So it says at the top here, most original plays produced in 1998 to 2007. And on this pie chart, we go from Deirdre Kinahan at 10, Gary Mitchell 8, Raymond Scannell 7, John Lokenny 7, Enda Walsh 6, Dermot Bulger 5, Michael West 5, Marina Carr 5, Sebastian Barry 5, Owen McCafferty 5, Paul Mercer 5, Dave Duggan 5, Conal Creedon 5, Conor McPherson 5, and Tom Swift 5. So what we notice here is that Frank McGuinness has dropped off the list, and Deirdre Kinahan, Gary Mitchell, Raymond Scannell, and Donald Kelly are the most prolific writers of original plays during the Celtic Tiger years.
So if we compare that to the last 10 years, I'll just read out the figures. It starts with Rosemary Jenkinson 15, Gavin Kostick 10, Enda Walsh 8, David Ireland 6, Stacey Gregg 6, Deirdre Kinahan 6, Corrine Pennyfather 6, Philip Doherty 5, Mike Kenny 5, Mick Donnellan 5, Amy Conroy 5, Paul Bosco McAnini 5, Dylan Coburn-Gray 5, Lucy Caldwell 5, and Jimmy McAlevey 5. So Rosemary Jenkinson, Gavin Kostick, Enda Walsh and David Ireland are leading the way here, and we're seeing new playwrights coming to the fore, including Philip Doherty, Amy Conroy and Dylan Coburn-Gray, who all premiered 5 new original plays in the last 10 years. And you'll just see that the playwrights in blue there, Enda Walsh and Deirdre Kinahan, were also prominent writers of original plays in the previous period.
So this slide is titled Most New Plays and or Adaptations Produced 1998 to 2007 by Company. So what you notice, the first one is the Abbey, who are way out ahead with 57 plays in the period. And then it's Fishamble, Bewley's, The Gate, The Lyric, Tall Tales Theatre Company, Tinderbox Theatre Company, Replay Theatre Company, The Ark, Red Kettle Theatre Company, Double Joint and Team Educational Theatre Company at 12. So we go from 57 from the Abbey to 23 right down to 12 in those top 10 companies, if I've got my numbers right. So we note here the considerable contribution of companies such as Tall Tales, Red Kettle, Double Joint and Team to the new play repertoire, each of which has ceased to operations.
So these are the companies who were most prominent in the current period. So this is 2008 to 2017. So you have the Abbey still ahead with 49, Bewley's have 23, Tinderbox 18, Fishamble 18, the New Theatre 16, the Lyric Theatre 16, Theatre Upstairs 11, Access Ballymun 11, Project Art Centre 11, Kibosh 11, and Rough Magic Theatre on 10. So when compared with the current period, we see that these funded companies have produced fewer new plays in recent times. And while companies such as the Gay Theatre and the Ark have fallen off the list, newcomers like Theatre Upstairs and the New Theatre are making a big impact on new play premieres, with resulting implications on the scale of plays being produced. So when we turn our attention to the venues that are championing new work, Project Art Centre has been the site of 65 new play premieres in the past 10 years. And I'll just read out the numbers for the last 10 years. So Project is 65, Bewley's is 55, Smock Alley 47, the New Theatre 46, Abbey 45, Theatre Upstairs 35, the Town Hall Theatre 18, Lyric Theatre 16, Axis is 13, and the Playhouse in Derry 13. The Micklally 12, the Everyman 12, the Civic Theatre 11, Old Museum Art Centre is 11, and the Lear is 10. So we're seeing a geographic spread here with Bewley's, the New Theatre, Theatre Upstairs are the smaller venues that are the home of new writing in Dublin. And the Town Hall Theatre in Galway, the Lyric in Belfast, and the Playhouse in Derry, all presenting significant numbers of premieres of new Irish plays around the country.
So we hope this has given you a flavour of what's been happening over the last 10 years and some references to the previous decade, and gives you some sense of maybe some of the contrast between the Celtic Tiger period and the recession period. ITI welcomes any feedback that you might have on any of these play entries. You can email directly to playography@irishtheatreinstitute.ie, which gets you Claire. Also, if you would like a copy of the presentation, please email Claire for that. We really apologise for the fact that the slides didn't really read because the light's too bright in the room, but you can find the information there. We also should say that we have a biannual meeting with our playography advisors where we discuss the inclusion of new writers, especially first-time writers, obviously. And then we have on our website our findings reports for the last, since I think the first one was done in 2005, is that right? Findings reports 2006, and you can look at those reports if you're interested and see the comparisons over time for the new writing repertoire. And finally, just to say that we will have this available for the day for people to look at, and what it is really just is a selection of programmes from some of the productions over the last 10 years, and a script. We've selected these based on them being projects or programmes for plays that we think were of huge significance, and also just as a small thing from an archival point of view to point out that we are really reliant on programmes, or that was our main instrument of gathering information for research purposes, and fewer and fewer people are doing programs, and so it becomes trickier for us to kind of make sure we've actually got the first premiere production. And this will be available for the day, and people, please take a look at it. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Siobhán and Claire, for that really fascinating analysis and overview of new plays and playwriting in Ireland, as always. So thank you very much for that. And staying beautifully within their 15 minutes allocated as well. So, so just to remind you, we're going to have the presentations in the morning, and there'll be plenty of time for discussions and questions. And I think almost all the speakers this morning are able to stay on for the afternoon as well. So if you have any questions, please make a note of them and keep them stored up for the afternoon session. The only negative thing in that whole presentation seems to be that the day is too bright and lovely outside for the screen. So that's a good complaint so far. Next, we're going to hear from Gavin Kostick, who was featured in that last presentation as one of our most prolific playwrights. He's also the literary manager at Fishamble, and he's responsible for a number of our schemes, including the New Play Clinic and also Show in a Bag, of course, which we partner with the Irish Theatre Institute and Dublin Fringe on. So I'm going to hand you over now to Gavin Kostick.
I'll keep talking into the microphone because the whole thing's being recorded, but otherwise I would, just talk. Productive, Jim, rather than prolific. That's what I'd say. There was a surprise, actually. It was quite pleasant. I can't remember them. What I'd like to do for the next 15 minutes, I am the literary manager of Fishamble, the new play company. And what I'd like to do is just talk about how things have evolved within Fishamble over the last 15 years to give you some idea of what we do and why we do what we do, and maybe some kind of glimpse into the future at the very end of that. Jim, if you'd just time me there in case. I'd pick up the story in 2004 when Orla Flanagan, our then general manager, came back from placement in the Fulbright Centre, Washington, D.C. She was in the Kennedy Centre. And she said that we really need to think about Fishamble, every company does, to really, really dig deep and think about what we were doing. So we cracked out the Post-it stickers, got a whiteboard of markers, and spent a very happy day really looking at what we were doing. And one of the things we did in a moment of impatience, the company was actually called Fishamble, and I wrote Fishamble, the new play company across the board, so we were clear this is what we did. And then that stuck, because we were then start to be able to explain to audiences that we are a new play company. That is what you can expect. They are all different. So that happened. And then Brian Friel had very kindly sent us a quote, and he said, without Fishamble, new Irish writing would be anemic. So we thought about that image, anemic, lack of iron in the blood, richness of blood, circulation, and we came up with Fishamble at the heart of new Irish writing. So if you've heard that phrase, that's where that came from, is that meeting. Now that's quite a big statement. So we kind of thought, well, if we're going to say that, you actually have to do things. So in the arts world, if you say this is what our policy is, you kind of go, and then how do we enact it? So we started to think about that. So one of them was the commitment to touring. That's good, circulation, we go around the tour. So there are 60 to 80 venues around Ireland. We have been to, I think, all of them multiple times, and we have very good partnerships with them. So the work was circulating. And then what happens is the more you circulate and the more successful plays are, the more people send you scripts. So we receive a lot of scripts. So that's circulation. The problem with a lot of the scripts is actually they're very good. They're really good. And you're going, this is a little bit frustrating because they're not quite where they might be, but they are really good. If they're only, the writer had a chance to think a bit more, maybe they could even progress more. So the evening courses, which still exist this day, began out of this sense of if we can talk to writers a little bit earlier in the process and encourage the development of the script, then maybe for us and for the rest of the sector, the plays will be in a slightly better position. So they started to exist. Then there was 2 a year. Then the weekend courses came in, which are 3-day courses, because we observed that across Ireland, people couldn't attend 9 weeks all at the same time, and also actors and theatre professionals. So actors could then come in for a weekend in a way that they probably wouldn't be able to do for 9 weeks. So that happened. And also with the touring, we were able to start talking to the venues about mentoring and within the venues. So year-long mentoring schemes, weekends, and they often come with a package. So there'd be post-show discussions, a show by Fishamble, and a workshop during the day. So then you start to attract from a local area people into that. So they're all writing. So this is sort of goes along nicely. A decision we made at the time was also to publish everything. we hadn't actually published everything, and very much like ITI would say, things get lost in time, they vanish. So we started to publish every single work that we had with publishing partners. And that's worked a treat. They go into universities, they go into reproductions by other places, they get into translation, because they exist in the world. So you're kind of thinking about it like that. Then I want to deviate for a moment to a thing called Tenderfoot, which is not a Fishamble thing, which is a scheme run in the Civic, run by Veronica Coburn, with me, Liam Halligan as well, and a number of theatre professionals from transition year students. That started around 2007, and it was an annual thing. And at the end of it, when everyone is exhausted and shattered, and you know, there's 40 transition year students, it's quite a lot, so you go, great, done, going home. Veronica would say, and now here are our feedback forms. You have to fill in your feedback form. And you go, no, do I really have to fill in the feedback form? All right, fair enough. And all the transition year students filled in their feedback forms. Everyone's filling in the feedback forms. And what Veronica was able to do was improve that scheme year on year because it was repeated. So maybe this is blindingly obvious, but it suddenly struck me that any scheme that is repeated year on year is, with the same budget, is improvable. That's the problem for new writing. It's very difficult. The projects come up, the project is on, you do your thing, you all go home. It diffuses into the sector, yeah, but the scheme itself is hard to improve. So that thinking is one of the streams, only one, that went into something like Show in a Bag with our partners ITI and Fringe, where we were able to launch something which is for performers to come on board. There's 4 or 5 new plays produced in Bewley's Cafe Theatre, you saw it there, which then are tourable. So there's thousands of the, productions of those shows, very successfully, international award-winning, into various media, radio and film, Dublin Old School coming out as a movie. So that would be sort of that kind of process. But we were able to improve it, especially the ITI and Fringe, and ourselves were very keen to go, yeah, we can do this model better and better and better. And the works are varied as they come through. So that was kind of an interesting thing to observe. Same goes in a way for New Play Clinic, which also came in at the time of the crash that was talked about earlier, where you're looking for ways to support new work for production, for which there's a production planned, which Fishamble could be of aid to in that development. So with that one, with New Play Clinic, for example, what we're really looking to do is help people make a step change in quality as it progresses. So in other words, whatever the level the company is, the resources, the people involved, from different scales, the scales of those is very varied. You go, yeah, from here, we're going to help you just a bit, as far as we can, to facilitate you to get the best possible show you can out of it. That scheme is ongoing, as you know, so we're open for business. If anyone has a production plan of a new work, talk to us at the end. Give you one more example of a repeated thing, which would be the New Writing Award at the Fringe. So every year we go for a New Writing Award. I was saying about circulating plays and people send us plays, but also as a new writing company, you're looking to suck in authors. In other words, just sitting there doesn't seem to be enough. So where do people write? Well, they write in youth theatres, they write all over the place. They also write for the Fringe. So by having a Fringe New Writing Award, what it meant was that every year we could get 20 to 25 new plays in and really look at that work. So that was what we were thinking. And we were able then to provide a New Writing Award, and which came with a package of supports, which we're very, very happy with. There's a number of award winners in the room today. In fact, Eva will be talking in a bit, but just take Eva, sorry about this, as an example. So what happens there is Eva is a really fantastic writer. She's written 2, 3, 4 works. In fact, she tells me 7. I don't really believe her. And then she writes a play for the Fringe called Overshadowed. We were able to give that a New Writing Award. That is able to tour, becomes a TV series. Not much to do with us, but it did. You can watch it on BBC 3. But then we can offer a weekend course more significantly. She's an actor. She's busy. She does the weekend course. We can set an exercise. The exercise is a short play exercise, which we'll talk about in a sec. That becomes the opening of Maz and Bricks. Maz and Bricks gets a full commission. Maz and Bricks, at the time of repeal, now is on tour and has just been on tour. So for us, that's kind of the way it works. That's the way we could think about things and see that that flow is actually happening and new plays are actually being produced and toured. And it goes round again. At one of the last workshop I was in, someone was there, they were chatting, why were they there? Oh, they'd seen Maz and Bricks, they'd been at a post show, they'd met Eva, thought it was fantastic, they want to write a play, they come to us. So you kind of go, okay, yes, that is a system that is working. I want to talk about kind of one last thing, which leads towards a play for Ireland, which is, that's circles. So I was thinking about spirals, and many people know this, I like this. This is Yeats's great image of time, the hunter with the falcon. So the falcon goes up in a spiral. This is the centre cannot hold, and things fall apart. When that spiral falls apart, they really fall apart. That was the economic crash. But if that spiral holds, what happens is you re-arrive at the same place in a higher point. So you look down and you see yourself as the falcon in the landscape. The landscape, it's bigger, but you see yourself in it. Christmas is like this. So every year we arrive at Christmas, and we see Christmas not only as it is, but all the other Christmases we've ever had. And if you're ever happy enough to have children, it all works out well. If that's going well, then you can actually see generationally your own self in that Christmas as well as yourself now. So it's a very interesting thing. I think that's happened once with Fishamble, and it happened that we set the play exercise that I was saying back in 2004. It was a short play exercise. That became a thing called Shorts, which was a set of short plays. At that point, we were asked, could you repeat it? In other words, we could have repeated that every 3 years quite happily. But it didn't feel right. All the others have people coming into the scheme, showing a bag, new play clinic, tenderfoot, which is not us, but it's a different thing. But they had people coming in. This felt like that's us doing it. And if we do the same thing every time, maybe that's not right. So we left it. And then 3 years later, we were doing site-specific plays, and we came up with Whereabouts, which was an award-winning production, which was site-specific plays, and really at the start of immersive theatre in Ireland. And that was also a huge success. And we left it again, in spite of the fact that we could have done it again. And 3 years later, we came up with Tiny Place for Ireland, which is probably the most successful of those at that time, where we did 2 full productions. The public were engaged. They're always about engaging the public. I should have said that. In they come, write the tiny plays, and that was a delight. At that point, I realized, to quote, I'm sort of quoting Veronica, but I'm actually quoting T.S. Eliot, our beginnings never know our ends. In other words, I start to realize that you don't know where things will be 5 years, but if you do good things now, maybe there will be a ripple effect. So what happened with Tiny Plays is that 5, 6 of them were commissioned as full-length plays and produced. The plays themselves were published, they're repeatedly produced, and the model was copied. So there's been Tiny Plays for Australia, Tiny Plays for Russia, Tiny Plays in Washington and Scotland and so on. So it became a ripple effect. That ripple effect lasted about 5 years, and then it was time for a play for Ireland, which is on now. So that is 30 writers. We're in 6 different venues around Ireland, working on new plays of 5 or 6 people addressing exactly what Siobhán was saying. Let's look at those cast numbers. Let's look at what the audience want. This is all about audiences. The substantial play for a touring perspective. Let's make that happen, or try and make it happen. Things can fall apart. The other quote is, out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made. I am always aware that you're working out of the crooked materials to hand rather than some sort of perfect environment. But that will result, it should do, in play readings all over Ireland in early next year, and a full production of a full play touring Ireland at the end of next year. And just to finish on the looking back thing, just to look at that, it has Fishamble-like things. It's an engagement with the public, it's an offer to writers. Production is queen, so production is actually there at the middle of it. It has new play clinic-like features in the sense that there's properly professional workshops throughout the year as part of that. And it also has, I've forgotten now, but there are other features about it which build on what we've done in the past without replicating it. So you're kind of going around again, trying to take on board everything you've learned, doing it as well as you can, and hoping that the ripple effect goes out forward into the future. So that's kind of what our thinking has been, although it's, it's a simplified version. Looking to the future, in 5 years' time, if I'm standing here and we're talking about this again, what would we hope to be talking about? Well, the ripple effect of a play for Ireland, an actual production, but the other things that happen because of doing that with our partners. That's what I meant to say. The Play for Ireland has the networked view of Ireland, the view of working with the venues as partners around the country. So now we're looking at the idea that may be rippling out, and maybe in 5 years I'll be able to stand here with Jim and the Fishamble team and say, yes, this is our new programme to launch. Also, playwrights, I hope, will still be at the heart of what we do. So in other words, we will be producing plays by playwrights that will be touring. That is the plan. I will ask Jim later in the afternoon about commissioning, which might be of interest to people in the room. Also, I think you'll be looking at circular models that we can try and improve year on year. They will change, they will vary, but the idea is to vary them as a sense of improvement as the schemes. As the environment changes, these things need to change, and we need to all move on with our partners. So that's a little overview of where Fishamble's at. Thank you very much, and enjoy the day.
Thanks very much, Gavin, for that. And next we're going to hear from Caroline Williams, who's the director of the Stewart Parker Trust. As you know, the Stewart Parker Trust is one of the country's primary support organisations for new and emerging playwrights, and they do fantastic work, and we're going to hear more about that now from Caroline. There are some seats up at the front if anyone, I know people are kind of sneaking in at the back, but anyone is brave to come up at the front. We're very friendly up here, and you can join us if you like, so maybe take a moment to make your way on up if you can. Okay, thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Fishamble, for inviting me here today. And thanks especially to Chandrika for pressing my buttons so I don't have to be ambidextrous. When I flip a page, I'm onto the next screen. we have a great gathering here, and I'm aware we have a very mixed crowd. Some colleagues I know very well, some colleagues will be very familiar with the work of the Trust. However, I know there's some people that know nothing about the Trust, so if you bear with me, I'm going to begin by talking about the Trust and then move on to speak more broadly about what we have encountered with our relationship with debut playwrights. Okay, Stewart Parker Trust, putting the playwright at the centre. Established in 1989 in honour of the late Belfast playwright Stewart Parker, the Stewart Parker Trust promotes, supports and develops new writers for theatre in Ireland, north and south. Born in Belfast in 1941, Stewart Parker was a poet, a prose writer, a music critic, a prolific writer for radio, and one of Ireland's most distinctive and original playwrights. Fintan O'Toole selected his play Pentecost for inclusion in Modern Ireland in 100 Artworks, and I love this quote, really catches Stewart. Parker's ambition was to create a theatre at once serious in its reflections on the political crisis and exuberantly theatrical. So that's that combination really catches him. You'll see a list of his most well-known plays there, including Spoke Song, Northern Star, and Pentecost. For those who want to read more about Stewart's work, there are 2 collections of his plays published by Methuen that are available. I've got some pictures for you, just to give you a sense of Stewart's work from original productions, but also from recent ones. So you'll see productions by the Lyric Theatre, Field Day Theatre Company, Rough Magic. In the centre is Stephen Ray, a very close friend of Stewart's in the... What? Oh! Oh, I'm talking about photographs. Okay, grand, okay. Okay. Well, will I hold it up? Grand, okay. Okay, well, we'll... Are we back? Oh, wonderful. Sorry. Well, there you go. There's the lovely pictures. In the centre is... in the centre is Stephen Ray, and this is a really interesting one down in the corner. You'll see, does anybody recognise this man here? That is actually John Lithgow in the Broadway production of Spoke Song, which ran for over 90 performances in 1979. And in the top left and the bottom right is the inimitable Eleanor Methven, who has been in many, many of Stewart's plays. And this is the last picture of Stewart's work for now, but there he is this is the Field Day Production Company production of Pentecost in 1987, and you can see Stewart sitting in the front, in the right-hand corner, and in the left is the late Brian Friel. Following Stewart's untimely death from cancer at the age of 47, his great friend John Fairley established the Trust to honour him and to perpetuate his legacy in the best possible way by nurturing a new generation of talented, innovative literary playwrights. The founding trustees were friends and colleagues of Stewart, and they included Leslie Bruce, Alexandra Cann, Robert Cooper, John Fairley, Brian Friel, Seamus Heaney, Jennifer Johnston, Frank McGuinness, Lynn Parker, and Lynn is also a niece of Stewart, and Stephen Ray. The very first recipient of the Stewart Parker Trust Award was Sebastian Barry in 1988. Today, the Trust comprises trustees chaired by John Fairley, an advisory panel chaired by Willie White, and including people like Deirdre Kinahan, a director and a treasurer, and you'll see most of our trustees are there on the right-hand side. We're missing an image for Leslie Bruce. The Trust is funded by the Arts Council and partners with BBC Northern Ireland and IrishTheatre Institute to deliver its programme. Stewart Parker's Trust's key activities include holding annual awards to offer bursaries, opportunities and a platform to emerging playwrights, hosting a week-long residential playwrights workshop at Tyrone Guthrie Centre, supporting one-to-one mentorship, and hosting playwright-focused events, seminars, and discussions. The Stewart Parker Trust Awards are probably the best known of our activity. We're an all-island body, and we present 3 annual awards in collaboration with our partners in BBC Northern Ireland: the Stewart Parker Trust New Playwrights Bursary, the BBC Northern Ireland Radio Drama Award, and the BBC Northern Ireland Irish Language Award. And the annual awards alternate between Dublin and Belfast. Here is a list of just the winners of the New Playwright Bursary. I'm happy to say it would take the entirety of my 15 minutes to list all the winning writers of all 3 awards and the 130 writers who have taken part in the workshop, but take it that there's a substantial body of writers there. This may seem a little bit technical, but we get asked this all the time, and actually it's very rare that we get an opportunity to articulate in public, so I'm going to run through it quite briefly. We work very, very closely with Irish Theatre Institute to discern what plays are eligible each year, and it's quite a detailed process. I'm delighted to say that our three closest colleagues in Irish Theatre Institute are the three here today, so Catherine, Siobhán and Claire, who work very, very closely with us. We are looking at debut playwrights. We cannot support all playwrights, so we've focused specifically on that. So we look for the first professionally produced play by a playwright based in Ireland, which runs for a duration of 50 minutes or more, was presented for 2 or more performances, is written by a single author, so not a devised work or a play of dual authorship. Again, this is all about putting the playwright at the centre. It may seem like we're excluding work, but we have to try and focus on the writer beneath the piece. Was produced in Ireland North and South. We're unable to consider plays, Irish plays, produced by Irish writers internationally, but if that play is a subsequent production, we may be able to include it. Is an original work, not a translation, an adaptation, or a version of an existing text. And again, this rule can be bent. If you happen to adapt your own work, so for example with Pat McCabe and Frank Pigg Says Hello, his adaptation of The Butcher Boy, that would be, but if you're adapting somebody else's literary work, then we don't include it. And is a player with 1 or more characters, i.e. not a stage memoir, a stand-up piece, or a piece that's better described as factual or a lecture. So, how do plays get selected for the shortlist? Each year, a panel of readers read all the plays that meet the criteria. In recent years, this has ranged from 18 to 38 scripts. This readers' panel comprises of members of the Trust's advisory panel and trustees, representatives from Irish Theatre Institute, and every year we have 2 independent playwrights with us. We work from the printed text only. This is important to stress, not the productions or critical responses to the production. So we really are there alone with the writer, with the playwright. And we do love to see work. I go and see work, and my colleagues go and see work, and our ITI team go and see everything pretty much. But it is very, very important to stress that, because it wouldn't be fair to base something. You can get very bedazzled by a production and actually lose sight of the playwright within it. So that's where our focus is. We announce a shortlist of 3 to 6 plays every year in advance of the awards. What are we looking for in a play? We're very aware that many of the scripts we read every year have had very little support in terms of dramaturgy. So the more appropriate question is, what are we looking for in a playwright? We're looking for a voice. We're looking for originality. Is the play innovative with plot or language or form? We're looking for theatricality, dramatic energy, and instinct for theatre. We favour work that's been very definitely, in some cases defiantly, written for the stage. Has the writer something significant or pertinent to say? Ambition. What would the writer's next play look like? Now, I know that seems like a really speculative thing to ask, but we do ask it in the room as part of our lengthy process. So, in effect, we're looking for writers of promise, not perfect plays. So that's where we're at. What are we finding? A snapshot of the 2017 long list shows the following. Now, this is, you had wonderful stats from ITI earlier. This is really just to give you an idea of what we find when we look for debut playwrights. So there were 21 debut plays. 8 were written by men, 13 were written by women, 9 monologues, 5 duologues, and only 7 of the plays had 3 or more characters. So that's 33%. So that's an interesting figure. Again, just from a snapshot of this year, we figure that 80% of the plays had no significant funding or a relationship with an established production company. So that in itself is interesting. And also, even when you look at our list of winners, you'll find that the majority of the writers that we encounter now have parallel roles in theatre. So they might be producers or directors, or actually most commonly they might be actors, and this is a really particular challenge to their playwriting craft. We've had many instances where a playwright would have been offered a week at Anna McCarrick, fully funded by the Trust, and has had to withdraw because of acting commitments. So this juggling is a challenge for all of us, actually, as a sector. How do we support those writers? This is a quote by Stewart. "I've always loved theatricality. Playwrights write for themselves in that sense. You write the sorts of plays you've always wanted to see." So how do we support the writers that we encounter in their debut work? How do we support the writers to make that second play, to write that type of play? how do we, is the writer best off developing their craft outside of the company model? You know, if we support a writer by providing dramaturgy, say, where is that play going to go? Who's going to produce that work? If they write ambitious plays with our sports workshops at one-to-one, who will produce them? And is the big play a thing of the past? Are we actually trying to lever in something that is perhaps an anachronism? You know, has theatre moved significantly on that the big play is no longer something that we should be striving for or seeking to support? That's a question I'm sure will come up in the afternoon. From our workshop, we meet the writers every year at the workshop, and we sit down and talk with them, and we meet writers all the time, and we talk with our colleagues in ITI. What does a playwright need? We are going to work with Tanya Dean, I'm happy to say, and Tanya is here on a conference as part of Dublin Theatre Festival this year. It'll be the third week of the festival, and it will focus very much on this, on what works for a playwright. But some of the things that playwrights have said to us that they need are obvious. They need funding, they need commissions, they need time, but they also need deadlines. They need dramaturgy, they need mentorship, they need readings, workshops, masterclasses, critical engagement. That's something that's actually particularly hard for a writer to get now. Productions, more productions, better productions, remounts of earlier work, to be part of the production process, and in some cases, to be left out of the production process in order to write. So it's very diverse. And what we're hoping to do with our own conference later in the year is to tease out those things, and also we're going to do substantial research with our former winners to see where that is at. I suppose I'm talking about what a playwright needs, but I would like to finish by saying we need our playwrights. Theatre Artists has been at the forefront of the current Repeal the 8th campaign. I can see there's a plethora of badges and T-shirts. Writers like Emmett Kerwin, Tara Flynn, Noelle Brown, Grace Dias, Veronica Dias, Rosaline McDonough, Eve O'Connor. These writers have I suppose, been hugely significant in writing important works for the stage that capture the social justice issues of our time. And then you move on to looking at writers like Tom Murphy and Marina Carr and Frank McGuinness and these writers who would have, I suppose, presented Irish narratives in a really vivid and visceral way internationally. So something that we must do is encourage writers at all stages of the development. This sort of a misnomer of this mid-career playwright. There is no such thing really as a mid-career playwright. There's no platform that you get on that makes everything easy. It is always a challenge for writers. So I suppose what would be wonderful to come from today and also from our work in October is to find what supports really do work and support these writers. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Lots of fascinating thoughts and questions for later to discuss there, as always. We're joined next by Jen Coppinger and Jessie Weaver, two fantastic people in their own right, and here today representing the Abbey Theatre, which, as people here will be very aware, has moved from having a literary department into a new work department. And Jen and Jessie are working very directly in that area in the Abbey. So we're delighted they're here today to share some of their thoughts with us. So thanks very much, guys.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much to Fishamble for organising such a great day. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jen Coppinger, and I'm the head of producing and new work development of the Abbey Theatre. And this is the Sonny to my share here.
Hi, and I'm Jessie Weaver. I'm the new work associate in the new work department. Will I just kick off and talk about? Okay, just kind of give you a very, very quick background, kind of where the new work department came from. It's kind of grew out of the former literary department, and while it still maintains kind of the functionality of the literary department, we're also trying to expand the ways in which we engage with artists and writers, and how we develop and produce new work. So just to kind of give you a sense of what we do. We read and respond to unsolicited scripts, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. We consider ideas and idea proposals for development and production. We provide development support to artists and companies. We commission new plays by playwrights, and we produce new work and new writing through a number of different contexts. So I'll hand it over to you, Jen.
Great. So the department at present is made up of 6 people. There is my colleague Sarah Lynch, who's the other producer of the Abbey, and myself, working in association with Katrina McLaughlin, who's our associate director. Katrina would work a lot with workshopping new plays, feeding back on drafts with writers, and is also our kind of resident Irish language speaker as well. So it's really great to have someone in-house that is expert in that. We will soon be appointing a dramaturg. If anyone is very interested in joining our team, the application is still open until the end of this month. We will be interviewing people mid-June and hope to appoint someone in early July. We work with Jessie and with Paddy Joe, who are the backbone of our administration. They would be the front line in terms of speaking with all of the unsolicited script writers, and also with the readers panel, which is made up of 12 people, and Jessie will go into a little bit more detail about that. I suppose examples of new writing that we have been working on in the last year are quite varied, and what we're trying to do with the new work department and the change that's happened within the Abbey in the last year is so the work, we're responding to the work as opposed to expecting the work to fit into, I suppose, a square box sometimes. So the examples are Porcelain by Margaret Perry that was on in the Peacock in February, and that is a really interesting journey in that it came through the unsolicited scripts, came across our desks in the summer of last year and was premiered in February, so it was a very a quick process for Margaret. Come On Home by Philip McMahon will be premiered this July, and that is a commission that was outstanding from the previous director of the Abbey and has been with us for a few years. So that will be directed by Rachel O'Riordan and opens on the 17th of July. Buicha by Dark Macanumera, who's a really prolific Irish language drama maker in film, TV and theatre, will be premiered on Tyviark this July as part of the Galway International Arts Festival. We're working in association with Dark. This was an Abbey commission that we're really thrilled to work on, in that I think it's going to be a very powerful piece of theatre, really exciting to see some contemporary Irish work. It's about fracking. It's going to be on in week 1 of the Arts Festival. Not a Funny Word finished a run last night. That's been part of a program called What's Happening Now that we did in about March of 2017. And this was a piece by Tara Flynn about having to travel. It's taken place in the Peacock in 2017. Subsequently, it went to Dublin, Galway, has gone around the country, and been very important political work. Frankenstein, which I always find very difficult to pronounce, by Michael West, will be coming to the Peacock this summer, and that is a production in association with Theatre Love It. Rapmines Road is a show that we're doing, a co-production by Deirdre Kinahan with Fishamble. And The Patient Gloria is a piece by Gina Moaksley. So as you can see, there's quite a variety of approaches that we're trying to do within the new work department.
Great, and I suppose I'll talk about one of the kind of planks of how we engage with new work, and kind of one of the first ports of call is our unsolicited scripts. The Abbey has always accepted unsolicited scripts, and we've tried our very best to make it a point to respond to writers with feedback. Just to give you kind of a snapshot of what happens in the unsolicited script process. It's usually the first port of call for writers and for us, for writers to introduce their work to us and their voice to us. It is extremely rare for an unsolicited script to reach development or production. But what we hope is that that a writer submitting an unsolicited script to us will give us a chance to maybe start a conversation with them. So any writer who's resident in Ireland or is an Irish writer currently living overseas can submit work unsolicited to the theatre. Last year, the Abbey received 350 unsolicited scripts, and this is up on previous years, and hopefully it'll keep going up and up and up. The gender breakdown at the moment is 37% female to 63% male writers. And that is held steady, so we need to think of ways to reach out to female writers to get them to send more work to us. It's the Abbey's policy to read, report, and respond to every unsolicited script that's sent into the theatre from any Irish writer. And in order to do this, we have a panel of 12, at the moment, 12 readers who are based all over Ireland. So we have readers in Galway, Cork, Dublin, and Belfast. And they come from a range of different practical backgrounds, from directing to writing to performing, and they also various age ranges, from college age all the way up to established artists. So we have a kind of a range of perspectives on which to view new work. The reading and reporting and responding process on average takes about 6 months, so it is kind of a lengthy turnaround, but the volume of work and kind of the size of our department unfortunately makes that kind of an administrative reality. And writers will receive a reader response of approximately 500 words of feedback on their script, and hopefully that they can take that on board if they wanted to develop the script a little further. So I'll hand it back over to Jen to talk about ideas.
So in March of 2017, we opened a formal avenue for pitches and proposals for development or production. And this is an opportunity for people to submit an idea to the Abbey, and it may not be necessarily a play, for lack of better phraseology. We're trying to provide a channel really for anyone regardless of background or discipline. So if you're a lighting designer and you have a really great idea, we would be encouraging you to submit an idea, as well as if you are a playwright. We ask 3 questions. One is, what is it you want to make? One is, why do you want to make it happen? And the other is, why do you want to make it right now? And this idea can be accompanied by video or audio, or if we're not very familiar with your work, maybe some examples of previous work. And it's primarily looking for new work that can be developed and staged, and we've considered work that's already been produced as well. We're really trying to be as open as possible. What you'll probably find quite interesting is that the gender breakdown for these idea proposals is a little bit more balanced, 52% being male and 48% being female. So far since March of last year and April of this year, we've had 180 proposals, and we're hoping we're in discussions with in and around a dozen artists about work that we think we will be able to help with. It's also a great way of us getting to know artists. So whilst we may not be able to proceed with every idea, of course, it's really great to kind of know what people are interested in. And we are going to remain to do this, and we will be looking at making decisions on a quarterly basis. So the next meeting that we will be having as a team and around the submissions will be in August of this year.
Great, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about commissions and specifically commissions for playwrights. At the moment we have 14 writers who are under commission, and those that spanned kind of both directorships, so the previous directorship under Fiach McAneil and the current directorship under Graham McLaren and Neil Murray. The gender breakdown for that is 43% women and 57% men. And we usually the pool of commissions is usually where we program new writing from. So it's kind of commissions come out of kind of a long relationship that we have with a writer, and that doesn't necessarily mean where they're at in terms of career or experience. We're usually just looking for a really compelling idea that we think responds urgently to the moment that we're all living in. Each commission and writer is different, so the process by which each commission is developed is different and is going to be different. So what a particular commission needs, there will have to be a bespoke process that's created around what that commission is trying to achieve. And if we do commission a play, we want this to be a commitment to producing that play, and we're looking at kind of a window of 18 months, kind of an 18-month turnaround from commissioning to production. And once we have a dramaturg in place in hopefully mid-June, they'll be overseeing the process of commissioning, and we'll work with individual writers on the development of work, on their development of their work through to production. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. So anyway, for anybody who wants to submit to us, I'm just going to kind of walk you through where we are on the website, because it might be just to kind of give everyone a sense of where we are. There is the floating arrow right above the pooch's head, and it is pointing to that that kind of equality sign with an extra parallel line there. So you click on that, ba-ding, and you get our menu there. So scripts and ideas. Click on that, and this is our scripts and ideas page in Irish and English. So we want to hear from all of you. Please submit your work to us. It will detail kind of, in general, what it means to submit a script to us, as well as what it means to send an idea into us. And again, the type is very schmudgy there. So those are the questions that Jen was referencing earlier. We have our ideas at abbeytheatre.ie, which is the kind of the catch-all mailbox for all submissions. That's manned by myself and Patty Jo Malpas. So if you're talking to ideas at abbeytheatre.ie, you're talking to us, and it'd usually be us who will be in touch with you, and not kind of an automated voice that goes, "Thank you for holding," or something like that, even though it is email. So anyway, and then also there's Patty Jo's address there, Patricia Malpas at abbeytheatre.ie. I'm Jesse, Jesse.Weaver at abbeytheatre.ie if you want to get in touch.
So as we said, we will be appointing the sixth member of the team this summertime. And I suppose just to talk a little bit about other projects that we've been doing that you may or may not be aware of. One is called 5x5, and this has been an opportunity for us to invite and work with diverse groups that perhaps haven't had a chance to make work on national stages or feel like their voices haven't been heard. So we've had 5 groups work with us this year, 3 of which have completed their weeks with us. One is in the middle of it at the moment. So we've had women in from Moyross Community Drama in Limerick making a piece about domestic violence and looking at domestic violence within a variety of cultures. We've had a company that are primarily from Longford called Shadowbox Theatre, who are a group of women with intellectual disabilities who made a non-verbal piece of theatre around the Tune Babies. We have had women from Pavy Point making a piece on the primary health care that the traveller community have been working tirelessly on for the last 30 years. And this week we have an Irish language group from the west of Ireland making a piece about the possibility of Cronwell not being so successful and what Ireland would look like. Next week we have Dublin Community Choir in, and they're making a piece about diversity called The Elephant in the Room, and that's really addressing the fact that culturally we're probably a very, very white community. So that will be at 7:30 on the Friday of the June Bank Holiday weekend. So I encourage you all to buy a ticket for €3 and come along. And we are really delighted to announce as well that we have chosen our 5 young curators who will be programming 2 weeks of work in the Peacock Theatre next year. So these are people aged between the age of 18 and 25 who will be selecting work that they feel is relevant to them, says something about Ireland, says something about our society right now. So that's us. Please come and chat to us. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be here for the whole day, but Jessie is. And we're always available to meet and have a cup of coffee, meet you in the Peacock. Come and say hello to us anytime you're in the theatre. And thanks again to Fishamble for inviting us today. It's been really great.
Oh yeah, thanks Jessie. Thanks so much, Jen and Jessie, for that. Lots of interesting thoughts there and observations and ideas. which I'm sure we'll come back to later. Some really interesting, it's interesting looking at the statistics actually for the gender breakdown of writers as well, because that's something we've been looking at in Fishamble, and it's, I suppose you do note that on a day like today, what we would expect is for it to be about equal or perhaps slightly more women attending than men, which seems to be the case. With our playwriting courses, there are always slightly more women than men. When we ask for submissions for ideas or for short works, like we did for a play for Ireland, everything's pretty much 50-50, as Jessie and Jen just said it is for the Abbey as well, and yet the unsolicited scripts then goes the other way. You know what I mean? It's much more like a third from women and 2/3 from men, or even more like 3/4 from men and 1/4 from women. So that's something that's seems to be the same across the board. So maybe we'll come back to some of those thoughts later on this afternoon as well. We're going to have, after the next speaker, we're going to have a break. We'll have some tea and coffee and refreshments and pastries outside. I can see Ronan frantically setting up cups there, and Eva. So we're really delighted, before we go to our break, to have our final speaker for the first half of the morning. Ruth Little is an internationally renowned dramaturg. She's been the literary manager at Out of Joint, the Soho Theatre, the Young Vic, the Royal Court. She's working with Akram Khan Dance Company at the moment. We're very lucky and honoured to have Ruth with us in Fishamble for the past year, and on an ongoing basis as an advisor, talking to her about our new play clinic and the various schemes and initiatives we run for writers and how we can develop and improve on those. She's a mine of information, and we're delighted she's here. So I'll pass you over now to Ruth, who's going to have a short 15-minute conversation with Gavin. Thanks very much.
You say this side. Oh, would you prefer that? Well, there is actually a second microphone that's useful. Should I do that? I think you can just get yourself.
Fine.
Okay, is that going to work?
That's fine by me.
Is that going to work? Oh yeah, great. Fantastic. This is great to be in, and thank you very much for coming, Ruth. It's part of a year-long engagement with Ruth, between ourselves and Ruth, Fishamble and Ruth.
Which mostly involves me just sort of coasting around in Dublin. I have to say the idea of me giving advice to you is sort of ridiculous, because I just absorb a huge amount of information. This man speaks more quickly than anyone I have ever met in my life. That was not a 15-minute talk, that was a half-hour talk compressed into 15 minutes. So I always go away from, and actually you're not much better, Jim, I always go away from Fishamble encounters with this buzzing in my head. It's incredibly rich.
Well, to return the compliment, Ruth, if it was a compliment, as you know, Ruth, I spend most of my life on the streets, and what I listen to is the word on the streets. That is pretty much what I do. And for about 2 weeks there, all I heard was people bending my ear about Giselle. They go, fucking Giselle, you know. But gosh, this is just astonishing. Now, Ruth will be joining us in the afternoon for the panel discussion. So in terms of prioritising the art and enjoying ourselves a bit, for now, I just really want to talk to Ruth about dance and dramaturgy and dance development, and that whole area that's really opened up. It's great to see in the ITI presentation new variations of theatre coming into being. And if we just take it nice and slow, actually, Ruth, for everyone, Giselle itself is one of the early ballets, I gather. So you're working with Akram. Who decided to look at that? What happened at the very origins of that, if you would?
Sure. Yeah, don't ask me about the history of Giselle or anything to do with classical ballet, because that is not my background. But it wasn't the background of anyone who was involved as creative team in that production. English National Ballet approached Akram. I think Tamara Rojo, who's the artistic director there, is visionary in her understanding that the classical world, for all its strength and beauty and resilience, also needs to connect with and communicate with the world of contemporary dance, but also with the contemporary world beyond contemporary dance as well. And so I think we're all interested in stories, in storytelling. Akram is a consummate storyteller, even in work that has no text. And that's so interesting to hear the focus on text today, because that's my background too. But I actually increasingly work with writers in a very different way. They are at the centre of the process, but they aren't necessarily visible at the centre of the process. And so there are many ways, I think, of working with text and language and as a form of communication among other forms of communication. And Giselle we approached in a similar way, because there is a complex story with Giselle. Tamara wanted to produce it because the ENB was doing a production of what's known as their sort of the traditional version of the piece by Mary Skeeping, and she wanted to sit it alongside a contemporary adaptation by Akram. So He'd worked briefly on a short piece with the English National Ballet, but he'd never done a full-length ballet. None of us had done a full-length ballet. It was a whole new world. And the first thing that we had to do was come to terms with the rather ridiculous story of the original ballet. We all went away and we watched countless versions of it, and we came together sort of scratching our heads going, oh my God, is it really true that we have to tell a story in which the peasants, the world of Giselle is divided into two halves, the realm of the aristocrats, who are the landowners and the controllers of the space and the people, and the world of the peasants, who are happy, bucolic, romantic, endlessly dancing and grape-picking servants to the aristocrats. And so it was very difficult to come straight in there and say, well, we're going to repeat this story. We couldn't repeat that story. We had to put ourselves in conflict with that story in order to find out how it might resonate.
Ooh, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Well, yeah, I've once come across people who say, yeah, there's a play. We need to problematize the play. So it means going, you need to make a problem. It's hard enough to get people to focus in the first place. Yeah. So, but you're saying here that kind of thing. You needed to make that play story a problem.
We were banging our heads against it because, but in a way, in a simple way, and ultimately a really productive way. You can't make anything without chafing against something. That is how everything comes into being. And so the limitations around the concept are also what leads you through it into the new work. So we were banging our heads against this idea of the working poor as stable, happily settled. In all of the productions of Giselle, they live in whitewashed houses with roses growing around the doorway. You think, whose house is that? Who lives in that house in the 21st century? Who lived in it in medieval Germany, for crying out loud? So we started to look at the conditions of the working poor in the world. It happened to be alongside the initial period of the migration crisis that was developing across Europe through Greece. And it sat in the context of the fact that the production was opening in Manchester, which of course is a city that was abandoned after the Industrial Revolution in economic terms, as the great global tide of capital flooded out of Manchester and its fabric trade and went into Bangladesh and built up its fabric trade. And so we found ourselves with all sorts of conditions that we could explore, and the main condition that we understood from our time, as opposed to the time of the original production, was mobility, the movement of human bodies in search of work and away from or following the tides of capital as they slosh back and forward independently of our lives and desires and ambitions. So we started to look at mobility and movement and homelessness and landlessness and as the conditions of the working poor in our time. And as soon as you do that, you create a new lens and a new language. And suddenly the original story isn't an issue anymore. And in fact, it was a delight to be able to work with the structure of the original adaptation. I think is a fantastic opportunity for artists, especially artists who are blocked in some way, because you could settle into the form and the structure of the story, but bring your own intentions and imagery and metaphors to it.
Can I is it in parallel or is it a separate thing? Can I bring in the physical body of the dancer at that point? Because this, that's a conversation, and it's fascinating looking at the work. But at the same time, there are people who are going to physically move to make this work and embody it. So how does that track come in?
Well, again, you're working with limitations and seeing those as opportunities. The limitation, if you like, was the classically trained bodies of the dancers, and the fact that they understood Giselle in bodily terms, embodied terms, far better than we did, but we were bringing new impulses towards it. And so the work that Akram had to do was, in light of the decisions that we'd made about reconstructing it as a story of power expressed through control of bodies and the movement of bodies and the expulsion of bodies from places and spaces. Akram had to work with those classical bodies which are trained to work vertically, to train to work against gravity, and to train to work with virtuosity. And in a sense, we unpicked all of those things and began to look at the role of gravity, the role of industrialized labor on bodies, because we were positing that our landless poor were workers in the garment industry. And so we wanted to explore repetition and regulation in bodily form as well.
My good friend Steve Daunt, who's a leading disabled rights activist, talks about this, and he talks about O'Casey being the finest writer for disability that Ireland's ever produced. If you think of the shattering effect of the First World War and the incorporation to that, when I think about those things, and the Manchester Looms, one always thinks about disability and the loss, physical loss. Yeah. Did you think about that as well?
We thought a lot about the uses and the abuses of bodies, and that follows into the second half of Giselle, which takes place in a sort of realm of death, where all of the women in the original who have been betrayed by their lovers and died of broken hearts, as women do, gather together under the ministrations of a rather angrier version of their dead selves, who turns them as a tool of retribution against the luckless men who come upon them. So they're called the Willies, which is always a ridiculous thing to have to call them. There's so many ridiculous things about classical ballet, and yet it is astonishingly, fantastically beautiful and strong and vital and vibrant. I don't mean to diss it at all, because we gained so much understanding of strength and discipline and coordination and complex forms of movement from the dancers, but we also had to push them to become, if you like, objects of these industrial processes. So one of the things that Akram did, just to finish your question, in the original, the dancers are on point for much of the work, and certainly for the second part. He kept them on point, which is the most ridiculous form of motion you can imagine. It's like having bound feet. That's exactly what we wanted from it. We wanted that experience of constraint and abuse of bodily form. And so you simply take one and you place it in another context, and it produces this incredible dynamic. It's a very powerful scene.
I believe in the Russian history of ballet, the original ballet dancers were serfs. They were actually serf slaves. So that abuse of the ballet dancer, you know, the teacher is aristocrat and the ballet dancer is the body to be abused and used for 20 years and then thrown away.
Oh yeah, I mean, they spend their lives in ice baths and things, the poor ones. They've got joints that are falling apart, and it's incredibly
I was very pleased, though, to hear you there start to talk about beauty, because, I mean, if you make a mental link, those who didn't see Giselle, but maybe something like Swan Lake, everything you're talking about is there, and yet at the same time people talk away about coming, like not being able to put it into words, a feeling of like, something beyond, something transcendent happened. Is that just something that, you know, happens through the body? We go through the body for a yearning for another place and somehow it happens, or do you actually talk about those kind of notions as well?
Well, I mean, my feeling is, and this comes from working in dance, I've learnt more about working in theatre by going away from it and working in dance and then coming back to it than I think I learned in the 15 years that I was just working full-time in theatre. But that's to do with my interest and my tendency, but also my sense that theatre, whatever form it takes, or live art, sorry, whatever form it takes, is about movement, is about motion. And for me, language and text are gestural capacities that we communicate in order to bring about change. And that change becomes visible at every level of scale when you focus down your attention within a dramatic work or a dance work. So movement is, I mean, Peter Brook said it himself too, everything begins with movement. Anne Bogart says it, I wait until there's movement and then I begin to swim. If you start to think about language as a form of movement that brings about change, then you don't have to create a sort of a somewhat artificial distinction between how we speak and why we speak, and what we bring about by speaking and moving. And we are moved. Everything is about movement in theatre. So for me, dramaturgy is to do with what moves in space and time, where it moves to, that's the narrative structure of things, and how we are moved by it, which is the evocative structure of it.
I think it's great. I'm just aware of time because this is conversational mode, sorry, but we'll have more time with Ruth in the afternoon, and you can pick her up, and anyone else, the speakers, then. Just very briefly to give you a chance, Xenos, so there's a whole new production just opened up in London, I think.
It's about to come to Sadler's Wells.
So Akram Khan's last piece in which he dances, apparently.
Yes, it's his last full-length solo piece.
Tell us a little bit about 2 minutes on that.
But again, going back to the body, it's commissioned by the 1418 now, a festival of work that commemorates the 100th year or years of the First World War. Akram was commissioned to make a work about the First World War, and he chose to consider the experience of a Bangladeshi soldier, a colonial soldier. There were over 1.4 million soldiers from India who fought in the First World War. It's only in the last 2 or 3 years that their contribution and their suffering has really been considered and explored and pulled up out of the archives. It's in the archives, it was held down in the archives. So we began that piece by thinking about the body itself as a form of archive, which holds the histories of its own abuses and its own traditions. And Akram is a Kathak dancer, so he carried that Kathak tradition with him into the piece and, in a sense, into the war.
Give us Kathak dancer.
Sorry? Oh, Kathak is a classical form in India, one of the main classical forms alongside Bharatanatyam. It's a form of storytelling. Kathak means story. And Kathak dancers were dancers who travelled around the courts in India, telling stories mostly from the Mahabharata and the great mythological texts. So at the heart of Kathak is the communication of story through very precise movement, language and gesture. And we explored a world that was being industrially disassembled during the First World War, and that meant that culture was disassembled too. So we wanted to look at, if you like, the unmaking of the traditional body, the flinging of that body out into the estranging circumstances of the trenches and the battlefields of the First World War. So it's very much a piece about estrangement. That flows through not just into the body language, but also the text. And there is a text for this piece written by the Canadian playwright Jordan Tannehill. A lot of that text was created. It became a form of orientation for us, movement-wise, and then it got reabsorbed into the piece. So only about 15% of the text is still there. It's the concentrated essence of the conversations and the emotional experience of that figure, that individual lone figure in the trenches, facing industrial form of exploitation. That seems to be all we ever make work about, industrial exploitation.
Yeah. What about the workers? That's what I say. Great. Thank you so much, Ruth. Are we happy to take a brief coffee break there? And we'll tell you when to come back in 15 minutes.